At 11:47 p.m., a 911 dispatcher in a small lake town picked up a call. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "My friend went for a swim a few hours ago. We just realized he never came back." A few hours ago. Not 10 minutes. Not 30 hours. By the time police arrived at that cabin on Mirror Lake, the fire pit was already cold. The beer cans were already thrown out. And the group of 6 friends who had spent the weekend together were already telling 5 slightly different versions of the same story. 9 days later, a fisherman found a body tangled in the reeds a mile and a half downstream. The official story says it was a drowning. A tragic accident. Case closed. But the family isn't buying it. The internet isn't buying it. And by the end of this video, I don't think you will either. Because when you line up the timeline, the phone records, and the autopsy report side by side, nothing lines up at all. I'm Helly, and this is the Crime Docket, where we take the cases the media drop too fast, and we go back through every single detail until it actually makes sense. Stick around, because this one has a twist in the final 10 minutes that changes everything you think you know about what happened that night. Let's get into it. If you're new here, we post a deep dive case every single week. Real files, real timelines, real questions nobody else is asking. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now because, trust me, you don't want to be the person who finds out about part 2 a month late in your comments feed. Let's start at the beginning because this case only makes sense once you understand how normal it looked from the outside. It was Labor Day weekend. A group of 7 friends, all in their early 20s, most of them friends since high school, rented a cabin on Mirror Lake for 3 nights. Boats, bonfires, a cooler that never seemed to run out. Every single photo posted from that weekend looks like a beer commercial. Smiling faces, sunset shots, nothing that hints at what was coming. The friend at the center of the story is a 24-year-old named, for this video, we'll call him Derek Lawson, a former college athlete, well-liked, the kind of guy everyone describes as the life of the party whenever a reporter sticks a microphone in their face. According to the group, the final night went like this. After dinner and drinks, a few of them decided to go for a late-night swim off the dock. It was dark. No life jackets. No dock lights. Just 7 drunk friends and a lake that, according to locals, has a nasty undertow near the old boat channel. At some point, and here's where the story starts to wobble, Derek supposedly swam out further than the rest of the group. Someone says they saw him treading water near the buoy line. Someone else says they never saw him in the water at all and just assumed he'd gone back inside. A third friend claims they called his name once, got no answer, and figured he'd walked back to grab another drink. Nobody went looking for him. Not for 20 minutes. Not for an hour. According to phone records later obtained by the family's attorney, the first text message referencing Derek being missing wasn't sent until 11:38 p.m., nearly 3 hours after the swim reportedly started. 3 hours. If you've ever been near open water at night, you know how insane that timeline sounds. 3 hours is enough time for a search boat to cover miles of shoreline. 3 hours is the difference between a rescue and a recovery. So the first question this case demands an answer to is simple. Why did it take so long for anyone to notice he was gone? Here's where things get uncomfortable. The 911 call wasn't placed until 11:47 p.m. But cell phone tower data, later pulled during the civil investigation, shows that members of the group were actively texting each other as early as 9:52 p.m., using phrases like, "Where is he?" and "This isn't funny anymore." That's a full 90-minute gap between the group knowing something was wrong and the group calling for help. 90 minutes. So, what were they doing during that time? According to statements given to investigators, they were searching the property and checking if he'd gone to a neighbor's dock. No one called the sheriff's office. No one called the fire department, which in this county also handles water rescue. No one, apparently, thought to dial 3 numbers that could have triggered a coordinated search while there was still a chance, any chance, of finding him alive. Instead, the group's own statements say that during that same window, at least 2 of them left the property. One drove to a gas station 11 minutes away. Security footage from that gas station, which the family's legal team fought to obtain, shows him buying cigarettes and a bag of ice and calmly chatting with the cashier. No panic. No urgency. Just a normal transaction, at what should have been the most frantic moment of his life if his friend was actually missing in the water at that exact time. When confronted with that footage months later, his explanation was that he needed a minute to clear his head. A minute, while his friend was drowning, allegedly. And then there's the second person who left the cabin that night, a young woman in the group who, according to her own statement, drove nearly 40 minutes to her parents' house instead of staying to help search. She has never fully explained why. This is the pattern that keeps repeating in this case. Whenever you ask the obvious question, why didn't you act like someone was in danger? The answers get vague. They get quiet. They get lawyered up. Which brings us to the next disturbing detail. Within 48 hours of Derek being reported missing, before his body was even found, every single member of that friend group had retained separate legal counsel. Not one shared attorney. Separate lawyers.
For each of them.
Now, on its own, hiring an attorney isn't proof of guilt.
People panic.
People are told by well-meaning parents, don't say a word until you have a lawyer. I get that. But when you combine it with what happened next, it starts to look a lot less like caution and a lot more like coordination. Investigators later confirmed that the group chat used by all 7 friends that weekend, a chat where they had been posting photos, planning meals, sharing memes, was permanently deleted from at least 3 of the 7 phones within 24 hours of Derek's body being pulled from the water. 3 phones. All wiped around the same time. When asked why, the responses ranged from, I clean out my phone regularly, to I didn't think it mattered, to, in one case, simply, I don't remember doing that. Digital forensics experts who reviewed this case for independent media outlets pointed out something important. Modern messaging platforms don't just accidentally disappear across multiple devices in the same short window. That kind of synchronized deletion typically requires intent, someone either manually deleting the thread on each individual phone, or the group actively discussing what to remove. So somewhere out there is a conversation, word for word, timestamp for timestamp, of what those 7 friends were saying to each other in real time as their friend was missing in that lake. And it no longer exists, which means the only account we have of that night is the one the survivors chose to give. That should bother you. It bothers a lot of people who followed this case. 9 days after he went into the water, Derek's body was recovered 1.5 miles downstream, tangled in reeds near a private boat launch. The county medical examiner's initial report listed the cause of death as drowning, accidental. Case seemingly closed within a week of the body being found. But Derek's family didn't accept that. They paid out of pocket for an independent, board-certified forensic pathologist to conduct a second examination, and that report told a very different story. Let's go through exactly what it found, because precision matters here. Finding 1. There was significant bruising on Derek's upper torso and shoulders, bruising the independent examiner described as inconsistent with typical drowning presentation and more consistent with blunt force applied by another person, potentially in the process of being held under the surface. Finding 2. There was a laceration on the back of his scalp that the original county autopsy attributed to post-mortem contact with rocks or debris during the 9 days in the water. The independent pathologist disagreed, stating that the wound pattern showed characteristics more consistent with a strike occurring before death, not after. Finding 3, and this is the one that really shook this case wide open, water samples taken from Derek's lungs during the second autopsy showed a composition inconsistent with the lake water, where he supposedly drowned. The mineral content didn't match. This raised a chilling possibility that independent investigators have since been forced to consider, that Derek may have entered the water somewhere other than where his friends claim he went swimming. Finding 4. Toxicology showed a blood alcohol level that, while elevated, was not nearly as high as several of his friends had described in their statements to police, statements that repeatedly emphasized how wasted Derek supposedly was, as an explanation for why he might have swum out too far and drowned on his own. In other words, the story that was used to explain his death doesn't match what his own body was telling forensic examiners. The county has since reopened the case, moving it from an accidental death classification to what officials are now calling an active and ongoing investigation. No arrests have been made. No one has been charged. But that classification change on its own tells you everything about how seriously investigators are now taking the inconsistencies in this case. There's one more piece of this puzzle that the true crime community has latched onto, and it's the account given by one of the young women present that weekend. Someone we'll refer to as Sam to protect her identity, since she has not been charged with anything. In her first statement to police, given the night Derek went missing, Sam said she never saw him enter the water at all, that she was inside the cabin the entire time. 3 weeks later, in a follow-up interview after the body was recovered, her story changed. Now she recalled seeing Derek walking toward the dock sometime around 9 p.m. alone. Then, in a sworn statement given as part of the civil suit filed by Derek's family, her account shifted a third time, this time claiming she saw him in the water with at least one other person from the group, someone she had not previously named. 3 different statements. 3 different versions of the last confirmed sighting of Derek Lawson alive. When an attorney for the family pressed her on the inconsistencies during a deposition, her answer was that she was in shock and trying to piece together a blur. That's a real thing. Trauma absolutely can affect memory. Forensic psychologists will tell you eyewitness recall is notoriously unreliable, especially after alcohol and a traumatic event. But here's the problem. Her third version of events directly implicates a specific person as being in the water with Derek at the time he allegedly disappeared, a person who, in his own statement, has always maintained he was inside the cabin the entire night and never went near the water at all. Someone is not telling the truth. And right now, nobody outside that friend group knows who. Let's lay out where this case actually stands, because I promised you at the start of this video that we weren't going to speculate wildly. We're going to walk through the realistic possibilities based on what's actually documented. Scenario 1. A tragic, alcohol-fueled accident, followed by panic. In this version, Derek really did drown on his own in the dark, and his friends, terrified, drunk, and aware of how bad the delayed 911 call would look, scrambled afterward to get their stories straight and protect themselves legally. Ugly, cowardly, but not necessarily criminal. Scenario 2. Something physical happened before Derek ever entered the water. A fight, an altercation, horseplay that went too far, and the swimming accident story was constructed afterward to explain away injuries that shouldn't be there if this was a simple drowning. Scenario 3. Someone in that group knows exactly what happened, and the deleted messages contain the truth. A truth serious enough that 7 separate lawyers have apparently agreed it's safer for their clients to say as little as possible for as long as possible. Right now, with the case reclassified as an active investigation, with a grand jury reportedly reviewing evidence, and with toxicology and forensic reports still being finalized, we may be months away from any real answers. But here's what we do know for certain. The physical evidence does not match the story the public was originally told. And when that happens in any case, when the forensic report and the witness statements don't line up, that's not a coincidence. That's a red flag. Derek Lawson went out on a boat with 6 of his closest friends for a holiday weekend, and he never came home. Somewhere between that dock and that lake, something happened that 7 people have spent months trying not to fully explain. Maybe it really was just a horrible accident made worse by panic and bad decisions. Or maybe there's something much darker sitting inside a deleted group chat that no one will ever get back. Either way, his family is still waiting for the truth. And I don't think that's too much to ask. If this case bothered you the way it bothered me while I was researching it, do 3 things right now. Subscribe so you don't miss the update the moment new autopsy results or grand jury news drops, because I will be covering it the second it happens. Hit the like button because it genuinely helps this video reach more people who need to see this case. And drop a comment below telling me which detail bothers you the most: the delayed 911 call, the deleted messages, or the mismatched autopsy. I read every comment, and I pull viewer theories for future videos on this exact case. This channel exists because these are the cases that get one news cycle and then disappear. We don't let that happen here. We stay on these stories until there's an answer, or until there's simply nothing left to find. I'll see you in the next one.